Greetings, folks. My name is Ronways Gamgee, and welcome to the DtwenD system development vlog. In this video, I want to talk about a concept that will facilitate smoother cognitive processing for the game table that I'm implementing in the DtwenD system. This is a concept that I call going from head math to visual math. In my first commercially published tabletop role-playing game system, the Quick and Dirty system, which is available on DtwenD.com, link is in the description, I strove to make it as math-light as possible while sticking to my desired core dice mechanic. Whenever a player needed to roll dice, they would form a dice pool from 3 distinct traits. Each of these traits would have their own polyhedral die rating from D4 to D12, and they'd roll the dice. Depending on the level of risk the character is exposed to, they would use either the low roll if they were in a desperate position, the middle roll if they were in a risky situation, or the high roll if they had a position of advantage or control. The number rolled would determine one of 4 general outcomes, 1 to 3 being the worst, 4 to 5 being a success with complications, 6 to 8 being a success, and 9 to 12 was a success with additional benefits. There was no arithmetic involved, no counting successes, just arranging 3 dice rolled from lowest to highest. Maximizing the visual and minimizing cognitive processing was the name of the game. Something that I hope the mathiverse will appreciate. Now, since DtwenD is using D&D 5th edition as its foundation, very loosely, I might add, I wanted to employ that same principle of minimizing head math and maximizing visual math. D&D and the D20 system, being what it is, however, performing addition and subtraction with each dice roll is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be so tedious. The tedium I speak of comes from making sure that you account for all the bonuses and penalties for each D20 roll as the situation demands. Out of combat, this is relatively painless, since a D20 roll plus modifiers being compared to a target number will resolve the situation then and there, regardless of the outcome. And then it keeps moving. The narrative keeps moving. In combat, however, the action zooms in and slows down due to the main focus of the game, which is to engage in comprehensive skirmish-level combat encounters with a wide menagerie of beasts and brigands. Hey, here's a nice game title for a D&D knockoff. During a player's turn, they have to make decisions about which actions their character takes, and these actions have a procedure to them that typically involves incorporating numerical modifiers to a D20 roll. Basic melee attack involves a D20 plus strength modifier or dex modifier if the weapon has the finesse property, plus proficiency bonus, if applicable, from a +2 to +6, plus weapons attack bonus if it's magical, against the target's armor class, which may or may not be modified, depending on the circumstances. And that's D&D. Now, Pathfinder 2nd edition makes this basic attack even more involved, with a D20 plus strength modifier or dex modifier if the weapon has a finesse property or its equivalent, plus proficiency bonus, which depends on your character level, plus your proficiency rank up from +0 to +4, plus the weapon's attack bonus if magical, plus other situational modifiers against the target's armor class, which may or may not be modified, depending on the circumstances. Each of these modifiers is spread out on different parts of the character sheet, and if you're lucky, you'll have or be an industrious player that leverages themselves by having all that math written down and ready to apply to the D20 roll, along with providing the courtesy to your DM of telling them your total roll, not just the D20's unmodified roll. Would that we all be so lucky. Many of us GMs, however, are not so lucky. So we can either frustrate ourselves by wanting the players to be maximally industrious when it comes to applying the game's rules and mechanics, and then being frustrated when that's not the case. Or we can deal with reality as is and make things less arduous in an adaptive manner, making it less arduous mainly for ourselves. Granted, the players should strive to learn how to play the game that they're playing, but each game has its own learning curve, and each player learns at their own rate. I want to lower that learning curve by making more of an effort to meet them where they're at, because let's be honest, a lot of stuff in D&D 5th edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition, and their imitators, in my opinion, are needlessly complicated. Like, the game itself, it's just complicated for complication's sake, to make it last longer or whatever. So in order to reduce the learning curve and the time taken between each player turn, I decided to scrap flat modifiers in place of dice ratings as much as I can for the DtwenD system. Rather than using ability score modifiers, I use attribute dice, starting from D2, or rather D0, for like a completely average person, going all the way up to D12. And rather than using proficiency bonuses for skills, weapons, and tools, I use class dice, going from D0, which means you have no training in that class, or the equivalent of having no levels in that class, to D12, which is Grandmaster level. Classes in DtwenD include both the classes archetypes found in D&D and more mundane professions. Heck, if you want, you can even go 0th edition and make your character's race, or lineage in this system, into a class. So you can have a D6 in your elf class and add that to your D20 roll whenever you do elfy things. So whenever you want to make what I call an action test, you grab a D20, the most relevant attributes die, and the most relevant classes die. You roll them all together and add them up. The goal is to roll higher than 15 for non-combat challenges, or 10 when you're attacking your opponent in combat with the intent to deal damage. If there are circumstances that are working against you, such as poor lighting, bad weather, or an injury, the GM would roll penalty dice to subtract from your action total, which produces a net action total. In combat, these penalty dice would come from your opponent's attribute die and their class or feature die. All the math is out in the open, and all you have to do as a GM is to tell your player, add up your dice roll and tell me what you got. It's the same thing when their characters are attacked, only they'll roll their attribute and class dice, but not a D20, to produce a penalty to their attacker's roll, with the hopes of making their net action total a 10 or less. In other types of opposed tests, it's action roll versus action roll, or action test versus action test, and victory goes to the one who rolled the highest. If you like or dislike anything you've seen in this video, please give it a like or a dislike and leave a comment. Subscribe if you want to support my channel, and if you really want to support my endeavors, head over to my Patreon and become an appreciated trooper. The link is in the description. Until then, folks, take care and play to find out what happens.